Welcome to Forged in the Pacific, where our purpose is to inspire leaders and reinvigorate the warrior ethos. Using multiple platforms, we're bringing together warfighting professionals to strengthen the Army's profession and our bonds with our partners and our allies. Here at JPMRC, the Army's newest regional combat training center here in the Pacific, we support the theater campaign plan by building readiness, strengthening partnerships, and enhancing partner capacity. JPMRC is the epicenter of interoperability and modernization. This episode of Forged in the Pacific, what I wanted to focus on is like the backbone of the Army and the NCOs. And you guys just got done, spending a couple hours with all the NCOs, and you've spent a couple weeks now like talking about it, preparation about what we were going to do out here, what we were going to focus on. Before we go into like introductions and stuff, like, what was the biggest takeaway? Like, what you guys were fired up when you just walked up here? You just got done, and you were like you just got done talking to them. Like, what was that all about?
I think the part of the reason that Sergeant Major Porter and I were like pumped up about it is because, and he said it earlier, NCOs will tell you what they're thinking.
Yeah.
They tend to sometimes unfiltered or unvarnished, but they're going to let you know the good, the bad, the ugly, which is one of the things we appreciate about the NCO Corps.
Yeah.
We not only appreciate, but I think expect. That's kind of part of the job.
Yeah. Well, this is just going to be a conversation, right? This is three people talking about what we already kind of love doing, and that's training soldiers, and what we just learned out of here at the JPMRC, the Alaska exercise here. And we're also going to talk a lot about like going forward, like what are the things that we need to be, focusing on. But like, before we do that, like real quick, just spend a minute, like tell us who you are, what you're doing right now, and potentially what you're doing next. You go first, Porter.
My name is Alan Porter. I'm the Brigade Sergeant Major of JPMRC. I've been in position now since April of this last year. Prior to this, I was stationed up here with the Arctic Wolves as the 321 Infantry Battalion Sergeant Major and the Squadron Sergeant Major. I love what we do across the Pacific because we're able to reinforce a lot of those lessons learned and spread the knowledge across the Pacific and help build those teams, and especially investing that knowledge we learned from the NCO Corps into every rotation. So I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm Jeremiah Waggoner. I'm the Brigade Command Sergeant Major of 1st Brigade, 11th Airborne Division. I've been in the seat for about 18 months. I'm actually leaving in about 5 weeks to go to JMRC to be the Ops Group CSM there. This is my third time being stationed at Fort Wainwright. The first was in 2014, did 3.5 years, and then Alaska kind of gets into your bones, so came back as soon as I could as an Operations Sergeant Major, and then got the position as the Brigade Sergeant Major here last summer of 2024.
Yeah, I think this is this special conversation even more so to have with you because now you get a chance to, you just went through the exercise, right? Everything's so fresh on your mind. But your household goods are already packed, right? Like
we're working it.
You've already packed and you're getting ready to move. And like, you're going to be in his seat here. I think you're going to go right into a rotation when you get up there, right?
Yes, sir.
You just had a kid too?
Yeah, 2-month-old daughter.
No big deal?
Yeah.
Right? So pick up and move across the world, here.
Yeah.
But you're going to be training soldiers in Europe here, and so what I want to talk about today is a combination of like what it means to do it in the Arctic, but like, what does it just mean to be an NCO and like, leader checks and like taking care of your soldiers and like looking out for them, right? Yeah. A special place in my heart. Obviously, I grew up as an enlisted guy, and I grew up, and the foundation of my life was being an NCO as well. So it's a special place in my heart to talk about these things with you guys. What's the so what? What are some of the big, huge things that came out of what they were talking about downstairs? You're down there for 2 hours with them.
Yeah. Well, Sergeant Major Porter facilitated the first hour and change of it, and then I had a kind of a closed door session with all the first sergeants and the CSMs and the ops sergeants major. A lot of it was, some of the things that Sergeant Major Porter brought up, and something that's I think unique to what JPMRC is doing with like a lot of this data collection that you all are doing each rotation. A couple months ago, Sergeant Major Porter asked me to send him a list of focus areas that I wanted him and his team to look at, in addition to all the normal things, the TNEOs and whatever it is. that OCs take a look at. And so ours was, it was unique to the 11th Airborne Division, unique to 1st Brigade, the Arctic Wolves, and a lot of it obviously unique to the Arctic. So everything from like how we're camouflaging, how we're using our environment, some of the field craft, but also the leader checks. And one of the things that's unique about being up here, at least, from my experience, is the reliance on our junior NCOs to really own their responsibilities as that leader, as that first line leader, and doing the proper checks. Because we kind of jokingly say that this is the only place in the Army where, especially in the wintertime, where an NCO, junior NCO, needs to be checking his soldiers before PT in the morning. Yeah. Because it's dangerous doing, going on a 3-4 mile run when it's minus 15 degrees. And so just kind of focusing on some of those responsibilities unique to the Arctic and unique to the 11th Airborne Division.
Yeah. What did you think was the biggest takeaway from what they were talking about downstairs?
One of the things that I did differently for this AER is I played the hype video at the end, because the way it kind of explained it was we usually show it up front to get the people hyped, right? To get them into the right frame of mind. But we talked about everything else first, right? We talked about the NCO's role in MDMP. We talked about PCIs, PCCs, PCIs. We talked about leaders checks. We talked about camouflage. We talked about everything else. And then I showed the video at the end because I said, think about everything you had to get, or everything you had to do to get to this point. Yeah. Right? Not just during JPMRC, but during Wolf Valkyrie, during the platoon and company live fires. So it's not just the 10 days of execution in the box. It's everything that the NCO Corps has done over the last several months, to include things like doing hard PT in the wintertime, whenever you have to put on snowshoes just to move around. So it's very powerful, I think, just being able to take a few hours to reflect on everything that we did, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but the NCO's role in just getting the men and women ready to fight. Yeah.
Yeah, like PT and attitude is what wins at the CTCs, right? Yeah. And what I mean by that is like the units that have been doing PT for months, they're physically fit, they're tough, they're ready to go when they get into the box. And then attitude-wise, on day 6 and 7, when things start getting hard, right? The units that have a good attitude and have been doing PT are the ones that are going to continue to push the fight, forward for those soldiers, and so PT and attitude is what wins in preparation. What were some of the things that they brought up as far as preparation? What were some of the things that were like huge, like we need to improve, or huge, we need to throw gas on that fire from a preparation PCI's standpoint?
I think the biggest thing for us is, one of the sayings is, it's never summer, winter is coming, right? And by and large, the brigade did a good job in preparing for this winter. We still identified some areas that we need to focus on more, or just spend a little bit more time. But, you get your few months of the summer and everyone's really enjoying the Alaska summertime. And then before you know it, the temperatures are below freezing and snow's on the ground. And if you're figuring out any equipment deficiencies or anything like that, when that happens, it's already too late. And so while we didn't run into much of that at this rotation, we still identified like some room for improvement, and whether that's some training calendar things or being more specific in guidance coming down from the brigade on when things will be executed. That was probably one of the biggest things I think that we took away in our preparation for for the winter, which is really an ongoing thing all year long. Yeah. Physically, PT wise, the brigade has focused heavily on our over the snow mobility. So there's more guys and girls skiing and snowshoeing now for PT than like I'd ever seen in my previous 5 or 6 years up here. We really take that seriously, and our ability to actually get out on the snow and move and be proficient with those modes of travel or transportation.
Yeah. And then as far as like rehearsals go, like, a lot of times rehearsals end up being like a replication of the training that you're doing ahead of time, the things that you do on the PZ when you're getting ready to go do an air assault, or when you're getting ready to do like actions on the objective rehearsals. Like it's a reflection of the things that you did in the rear. What are some of the things that we talked about in the rehearsals area?
The PZ rehearsal, I think, has probably been like the one across the brigade that has stood out as like we need to spend some more time and focus on that. We have an Arctic Aviation Command up here. The Army is standing up a combat aviation brigade, and as we kind of continue to get our legs under us, embracing the air assault culture and the air assault mission that we do have. We have identified there's just a gap of really of sets and reps, and that was one of the things that we talked about at the AAR yesterday, the brigade level AAR, where we had basically the whole division in there, and that we've talked about internally here. Is so that should be kind of second nature stuff. It is unique here because not many other units no other units in the Army are loading snow machines onto their aircraft or our Akio groups, and so validating load plans, which we had leaned forward on months ago to get that done, but then it's one thing to have it on a piece of paper and have photographs of it, and it's another thing to actually execute it, both us and the crew chiefs and the pilots and the PZ. So that's an area that we're going to spend a lot of time and put a lot of effort towards going forward.
Yeah. There's no mistake that there was a ton of NCOs that were also OCs, right? And so they're supposed to be coaches out here, and they're supposed to be the ones coaching and helping the NCOs that are going through the rotation to get better and provide them with feedback. Porter, what's it mean to be like a good coach? Like we talk here at JPMRC, little O, big C, like observer controller or now coaching, right? What does it mean for an NCO to be a good coach?
I think one of the difficulties that we face at JPMRC is everything that we do is a pickup game, right? We have folks from JRDC that come out. We have folks from First Corps that come out across the 11th, 25th come out to help support us. So we don't have a lot of time to get everybody on the same sheet of music. So we've really tried to empower NCOs and the fieldcraft area specifically by increasing the knowledge base that we cover in our OCT Academy, as well as just teaching them about the unit that they're going to go see. So I think we just have to increase the knowledge base that they have, not only of the unit's mission, right, but they have to be experts in that fieldcraft area as well. So we really need to improve what we're teaching them prior to the exercise, because if you just go out there and you see something for the first time, you really can't provide any real coaching on it. So that's something at JPMRC as a CTC, we can't just take that last month or two prior to the exercise. It has to be a continuous evolution throughout the year, and we just have to take off our Arctic cap and then put on our jungle cap. But all year long, we have to be proficient in both areas.
Yeah, and you're going to see this up there with JMRC. In the summer it's hot. In the summer we're going through the woods and it's lots of green. In the winter there's going to be snow. So your OCs are going to have to be a little bit bad. Talk about the difference between survive and thrive. Out here in the Arctic. What's the difference? You start with surviving.
So surviving just means like, can you stay warm? Can you stay fed? All right, and surviving, especially with our equipment up here, is actually pretty easy to do. As long as we can keep you resupplied with fuel and food, you can hunker down and just survive. One thing that's kind of unique to like Arctic doctrine, or at least the way the Army has taken the approach to Arctic, is we're still offensively minded. A lot of our partners and allies in some of the Nordic countries are largely defensive in nature. And when you're defensive, you can be more static. It's actually typically much easier to sustain and survive and in that context, thrive in your mission of being on the defense. But when we're also trying to push forward, that creates the challenges, the logistical challenges, the fitness challenges that we need. And that's what we kind of identify or classify as thriving. So not just being able to go out there, hunker down and say, hey, I was in the woods for 5 days and the average ambient air temperature was -30 and I'm still alive. It's the thriving piece of it is I was in the woods for 5 days, ambient air temperature -30, and I was able to move 20K and execute an assault, a raid, and execute my missions as dictated by the commander. I think that's kind of the difference between surviving and thriving.
And then from surviving, right? Whether it's a training exercise or it's combat operations, how many days did we have to stop what we were doing and then shelter in place? Last year, I think 3 days out of the 10, we were in a shelter in place, whether it was 50-mile-an-hour winds, -45, degree temperatures, which you can't be outside, for very long in those kind of temperatures. That's real.
Yeah.
Whether it's combat or it's training, you have to go into those. That's part of survival, right?
No, it absolutely is. And there is a point where you just go to survive mode, right? For risk assessment purposes and all that, we made the cutoff at -40 degrees, real feel, so ambient or wind or with wind chill. That at -40 we would kind of go to ground,
Yeah,
and just wait for that to warm up. because the risk just skyrockets. At minus 40, contact frostbite happens, in less than a minute. Touching
And
something.
the same would happen to your adversary.
100%.
If they chose to attack you in the defense at minus 50, 1 minute of being outside, and they would have their version of, they would have cold weather injury, and they would lose combat power as well.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with Colonel Berkey and the Op 4 commander, and he's now been the rotational unit. He's also been the Op 4 commander. He said, by far, being in the defense gives you the advantage.
Yeah.
Not being on the attack and being able to bound back and keep his people warm and keep his people fed, fueled, and prepared. They were absolutely at the advantage when they could dictate, what it is we were doing.
Yeah.
So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and we kind of study the Russian-Finnish War, 1939-40 time frame a lot, and that's the Finns had a great deal of success largely because they were just watching this giant element come on the offense to them, and all they had to do was just figure out a way to stall them, cut off their lines of communication, get in their G-locks, and then just let the winter do its thing.
Yes.
So I think those types of temperatures definitely favor a defending force.
Yeah. What were some of we'll go to Thrive with you next after this, but back over to you, Porter, is like some of the things that we thrive to survive in the Arctic. What did they talk about downstairs is the things that we've got to get a little bit better at from a surviving perspective.
I think going back to just basically PCCs and PCIs and leader checks, the Army does issue us some great equipment, right? But if we don't take time and actually inspect our soldiers, right, to make sure they're using the equipment correctly, right? And that's not just something that we can do in the moment, right? That takes several weeks, several months of just teaching them how to wear the equipment correctly. Up here in Alaska, they do have, at the Northern Warfare Training Center, they do offer both the CWalk and the CWLC. It's a great opportunity, but not everybody has the opportunity to go through it. So then it takes those individuals to go through those courses to go back to the unit and teach it and instruct it. But there's all sorts of opportunities throughout the year for them to train it. But then you also, being in a DROS-based unit, you're always constantly getting new people. So even if it's their first winter, they might have gotten to Fort Wainwright 2 or 3 weeks prior to the exercise, and then they give you your equipment and they have to go out and execute the mission. So it's just those real-time leader checks, making sure they're doing the right thing, enforcing compliance. Because a lot of the young soldiers and even the young leaders, if this is their first winter, they don't understand that winter is going to smack you in the face. And it might be a mistake that you made, but you're going to pay dire consequences for it. So
yeah. So let's go back over how do we thrive now that we know how to survive? And you guys proved, like the Arctic Wolves proved that they can survive here in the Arctic, and they can do whatever they're asked to do. But how do you now, how did you go into the thriving and to be able to take it to the enemy at your time and choosing? What were some of the things you guys talked about?
So one of the things you have to manage the way to thrive, right, and actually move forward and achieve your objectives is, I guess you can call it fighter management, right? And what is our pace and tempo of movement, and how do we mitigate the risk of the cold so that when we get to the objective, we can still execute the task. And our equipment helps us achieve that in a large sense, right? The cold weather all-terrain vehicle is a huge asset to us. Our snow machines help us mitigate some of the time exposed on foot between the CATV and the snow machine, being able to shuttle or transport troops, close to the PLD, the probable line of contact, or LD, and so they're not necessarily having to walk those 10 kilometers through waist-deep snow at those temperatures. So some of the TTPs that the units have established on leapfrogging sustainment with the attacking force, leapfrogging sustainment with the attacking force, so that as soon as somebody's at about the extent of their exposure time and they need to be getting warm, somewhere nearby is the ability of warming shelter, a 10-man tent, or whatever it is, to get warm, while another force who's been warming up and hydrating and eating some chow can then move forward and continue the attack or the movement. So
the priorities of work, right? Like so often we're like, security is the number one priority, accomplishment of the mission, but you have to consider, the things that you just said, because you can only go a couple days where you're low on food, low on sleep, low on all those things. We're talking a couple of hours before you need to be put back into some form a shelter to bring them right back up. Like it's, if you move for about 3 or 4 hours, you need about 6 hours to bring them back up their core temperature back to where it needs to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all temperature dependent, and that's the thing. And as you saw last year, sir, like last year we had, I think we were in the mid 30s above zero, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't even freezing for the first, well, it was about 5 or 6 days of that JPMRC,
Yeah.
and then the last 4 minus 40. So you have an 80-degree temperature swing. And so like that's one of the things that like our junior NCOs, all NCO leaders in general here, have to try to manage. So sometimes it might be 2 hours exposure and then get the guys warmed up, and then other times you might be able to push them a little bit longer,
harder.
a little bit farther before you got to get them warmed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle, to be honest.
Yeah. We often been saying fieldcraft, right? And we've been saying taking care of our soldiers, fieldcraft. That's what the NCOs are focused on over the last. What are some of the things that fall into like the fieldcraft area, the area where, you know, it's common everywhere we go, whether it's the Arctic or it's, you know, the woods up here in Europe? What were some of the things that they were talking about downstairs as far as fieldcraft that they want to get better at?
You know, me and Sergeant Major Waggoner were talking yesterday. Like, we talk about fieldcraft, but it's more of the NCO's responsibilities, right? Define responsibilities while we're out in the field. We have to allow our commanders the ample time to do the planning, and we have to be ready to execute. So what can we do as the NCO Corps to make sure that our men and women are ready to fight? And it starts from the day that they left Fort Wayne, right? Make sure, like you said, they're validating load plans, make sure that they have all their equipment. Because even though the YTA is only a half an hour drive, it's not like I forgot something, I have to go back. Once you're in the box, you're in the box.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that they spent several weeks, several months figuring out every piece of equipment that they needed, right? Because they realize once they're in the box, they're at war, right?
Yeah.
And nobody's coming to save you, right? That's one of the rules of the North. So they had to be able to not only fight with what they had to sustain themselves. And a lot of times, you know, they talked about how do I recover myself, right? I might not have the correct vehicle to recover myself, but I have to come up with a way to do it.
Yeah.
And it's the same discussion that we have with the 25th in the jungle, right? Is how can I use the skill sets that I have, that my NCOs have as the practitioners of war, right? They have the experience. How can I use that experience to be able to have my men and women ready to fight? So then the officers can do the planning, right? And then whenever we're ready to execute, they know that we have a trained and ready force.
Yeah.
So I think the word fieldcraft, we've tossed it around lightly over the last several days, but it's just the NCO's responsibility of getting the men and women ready to fight.
Yeah. We had some of our partners and allies out here. The Canadians were out here, and we learned a ton from watching what they do. What are some of the biggest things that you learned watching them and having them part of this exercise?
So the battalion that we had attached to the brigade task force, 3 RCR out of Canada, we actually gave them probably the hardest physical mission, which was just a slog down south on the southern side of the box through pretty unforgiving terrain. Like, the snow was already deep, and then we have the muskeg that's like pretty unique to the Arctic environment, very hard to traverse. They were going to be hard to resupply, hard to sustain, hard to evacuate casualties. They did a ton of math and science behind their movement. They had it all laid out on the exact weight down to the pound that each individual soldier by position would be carrying, how far they thought they could move, how long they thought they could move before they required a rest or a warming cycle. And just listening to that battalion commander kind of lay out all the, literal math and science behind it that they did prior to their movement, I think was a huge piece of their success, because they actually moved quicker than we anticipated. And then the methods that they used, again, of like with the leapfrogging and supplementing some of their movement with snow machines, it was truly impressive. And we had some of our soldiers down there a couple of months ago, and we weren't quite able to make that happen. The temperatures were much colder in December, and that played a factor in it. But watching them move, basically a battalion's worth of soldiers across that distance and that amount of time under those conditions was super impressive. And that's something that we're going to continue to talk to them about.
Yeah.
Because the TTPs that they used are obviously sound and something that we definitely need to incorporate into our kit bag.
Yeah, they did it really well. He explained it very well too.
He did.
And made it seem easy to kind understand how they did it, and now we can turn it into reps and sets back here in the rear, right? How to practice that with a squad. Squad turns into a platoon. Platoon turns into companies. You know, but being able to do the absolute like basics, right? Going forward. What was the last two kind of categories is leadership and the basics, right? What are the basics at the lowest level for our junior sergeants and staff sergeants that are out there? What are the basics that are common across the board that you guys talked about? We want to get better or we want to sustain downstairs?
I mean, the basics. One of the things I tell all the NCOs in the brigade, when I do LPDs, et cetera, just random engagements, is that it's kind of changed over the years since I've been a senior NCO. But I'll bring up a couple of things that just like stand out to me of the NCO creed. And like the one I've been on for the last like 18 months, or the two I've been on, is all soldiers are entitled to outstanding leadership. I will provide that leadership. And officers in my unit will have maximum time to accomplish their duties. They will not have to accomplish mine, right? And so what does that mean? I mean, the Army, right, just like front towards enemy on a Claymore, writes the stuff out for you. Like these are the roles and responsibilities of an E5 sergeant in the Army, an E6, E7, all the way up to CSM. I think it actually goes up to SMA. And so just getting them to, one, understand that this is what the Army says you need to do. So we'll start there, right? This is what the Army expects of a sergeant or of a non-commissioned officer. Then this is what we expect of you, at the battalion and the brigade. In this brigade, this is what we expect of you. Just making sure they understand it, helping fill in those gaps where there is knowledge, right? Because we have a lot of young leaders doing 1 and 2 levels up right now.
Yeah.
Young E6 platoon sergeants and some senior E4 squad leaders, running around. But they hold that position, and so we still expect those things out of them. So on the NCO level, literally not asking them to do anything more than you would ask anyone else to do in any other organization. But then you add the Arctic layer over the top of that. Where it's like you cannot be involved enough, especially in the wintertime, as a junior leader in the 11th Airborne Division or in the Arctic Wolves.
Yeah, I believe like soldiers do what sergeants do. Yep. So you have that at that level, you have to demonstrate. Follow me, get behind me, get in a wedge, and off we go. Right, you're there. But when you start to become that platoon sergeant and the first sergeant, it becomes sergeants do what first sergeant says. And so now it's like looking back and you've got to be guided. You can't necessarily be out there on the line kind of doing it for them, right?
Yeah.
But the sergeants, they got to lead by example. When there's no time for instruction and there's no time for orders, follow me. Yeah. Do what I do. Yeah. Right? That are out there. How about from the leader checks? What were some of the things that like the NCOs, like we have to be doing a better job of, or we have to keep doing them. We did a really good job on that.
I think it varied across the board, right? I think it depends on the mission set that the unit had at the time, right? Yeah. We talked a lot about pace, right? Sometimes you don't have time to do all those checks, but we know as leaders what's important, especially the guys, we called it, winter measuring contest, who's been up here a lot of time, has a lot of experience. So they know what's going to happen at -20 and -30. And being able to kind of get ahead of the boom when it comes to safety and anything that could cause harm to our soldiers. So I think that's the important thing about like the first sergeants in the room that have a lot of Arctic experience is they knew that bad things were coming. So being able to kind of paint that picture for their officer counterpart, if we do this, right, if we do the mission that we're asked to do, these are some of the ramifications that it could possibly have on our soldiers. And I think that's one thing that's very powerful about the Arctic Wolves is that they do have people that love Alaska, they love the Arctic, they love operating out in the wilderness in YTA and DTA, and they have all these rotations under their belt. So they're able to paint that picture. So even if a young captain or a young major who's coming up with a plan, it might be their first winter, the NCO Corps across the Arctic Wolves can be like, hey, I've been up here, I've done this, right? This is what's going to happen. And they can kind of be that crystal ball, right? And kind of show them what's going to happen if they do it a certain way. And I think the NCO Corps communicated very effectively with their officer counterparts. There's always going to be issues, right? The enemy always has a vote. The weather always has a vote. But just the communication between both the officers and the NCO counterparts, not only being able to accomplish the mission, but also make sure we put welfare of the soldiers paramount above everything else. So.
I'll jump in on that as well. regional expertise is huge here. I have some first sergeants that have been here 4, 5, 6 years. I got a couple of CSMs that are in the double digits now of winters up here. And maintaining people or maintaining that regional expertise is huge. So so the whole formation isn't constantly relearning, what winter is like in the Arctic. And to the crystal ball point, like getting them to be more vocal, some are plenty vocal, but some are a little bit more reserved, but they got to understand the role that they play in that. And really, if you go into any organization that has some type of specialty, right, us being Arctic, and then you can call, sit around a jump master brief before an airborne operation. Who's the person that's going to say, hey, that's not going to work, or we need to make an adjustment? 9.5 times out of 10, it's that sergeant first class or that first sergeant who's been on jump status for 12 years, who's done this 100 times, right? So it's the same thing here, relying on their expertise, because it's one thing to read a document and know how to execute something. You can read the Arctic Doctrine and be like, okay, that makes sense. It's a whole nother game to actually execute it at those temperatures, and they have the experience to do that. And so, really bringing them into not only the planning process when we can, or them injecting themselves into the planning process to avoid some of these things,
Yeah, one of the worst is when someone says, like, I knew that plan wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
Or I knew we were going too fast. I knew we were going, too long, and they're not in their head. Like, I knew that. Well, if you knew, why didn't you tell, why didn't we tell somebody ahead of time or say, like, hey, here's going to be the risk with doing what you just said. Right. And you got to be comfortable, stepping up and doing those things. Yeah. And if you're on the officer side, you got to be ready to get that feedback. You got to solicit that feedback. And they're not going to give it to you at the last second if you haven't been asking for it all along the way. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's the other part of the equation is like not being wed to your plan, not being or wed to your idea. And understand that you might get some feedback that's going to throw a wrench in that, and you're going to have to adjust. And that's leader in general. It's rank agnostic, whether that's a senior NCO or an officer. But being willing to take that thing and say, "Oh, I didn't think about that. We need to adjust on that."
Yeah. Hey, last area, and I didn't prep for this. I didn't tell you guys ahead of time or anything like that. But what are you looking forward to over the next couple of months the most? In your case, it's like JMRC, and what are you looking forward to? And some of those first things that you want to look into, and then from your case, what are you looking forward to about the Philippines, so people can get an idea about what you're already thinking about in preparation for those.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I am leaving shortly. I think I got 45 days left or something. But the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is being able to kind of consolidate all of these lessons learned, consolidate gains, right, of the things that we did well out here at JPMRC, and build the continuity. And I think it was you actually, sir, yesterday that said the best continuity is the people that, all the leader turnover that's about to happen, the people that we leave behind, whether it's, subordinate or peer, the people that are still going to be here. That's the best continuity we could have, because I can hand a book off, like you said the other day, to the incoming brigade CSM, and that's great. But having the people who know how we operate, the mistakes that we made, so we can avoid making those same mistakes again, and the things that we do well to continue to fan the flames of success on those. That's pretty much, besides, packing up my unaccompanied baggage tomorrow, that's my number one focus for the next 6 weeks, is making sure that the brigade, I think we took a great step forward throughout this rotation, and that we continue on that upward momentum and forward progress, and that the stages are set, the conditions are set for that to occur, even after myself, the brigade commander, and a lot of our battalion commanders leave. That's probably my thing I'm looking forward to most, is what the Arctic Wolves do in my absence.
Yeah, me too. And that same attitude I can see you taking to JMRC and bringing that up there, and coming in from the beginning, taking everything that you learned here and applying it to that team from a coaching standpoint, you just came out of a leadership position, you know what it's like. What are you looking forward to the most, Porter?
I think one thing that me and you always talk about is we get to travel all over the Pacific and hang out with our friends, right, and help them get better. I'm very excited about the Philippines because we have sent some young captains right? We're sending them to the 2nd and 3rd Brigade and the 25th. We sent some NCOs up there that this will be their first rotation, right? Then now they're on the other side, right? They learned all these lessons, these valuable lessons, because it's leadership development as an OCT as well. So they've seen all these different units go through the Alaska rotation, the Hawaii rotation, the Phil rotation, but now they're the person in the arena, right? And now I get to see them on the opposite side. So now not only are they watching, observing, but now they're the dude that's being assessed, right? And being able to like still be able to kind of whisper in their ear and give them some positive coaching and feedback. So it's very, very exciting for me just to be able to see them take that next step. And not just them, the guys that are the first sergeants that, you know, they were maybe platoon sergeants last time we saw them, and they're taking that next step in leadership and seeing how much they've grown since last time we saw them over there. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for doing this with me today. And talk about a recruiting opportunity. Like half of the CTC CSMs are sitting in front of me right now, you know? So like, you are the people, like people want to be like you, and they're going to want to be a part of an organization that you're in charge of, because of the way you take care of people, because of the way you actually care about them getting better at what it is we do, and be better leaders, better NCOs. You invest in not just the NCOs, but you invest in the officers that are around here. The amount of time I've seen both of you invest in the junior officers, the lieutenants on staff, the captains on staff, the company commanders, like officers learn a ton from hearing what Sergeant Major has to say. And so continue to invest in everybody that's out there. It's not just NCO roles and responsibilities and officer. These are what leaders do to make great organizations. And any organization that you two are ever a part of, is going to be a great organization. And the continuity is the people that you're producing and the people that are going back out. So anybody that says when they go out to the rest of the Army and they say I was an Arctic Wolf, we're going to know who they were with. And if they come from JPMRC, we're going to know who kind of coached them up and got them where they need to be before they go back out to the Army. So thanks what y'all are doing for the Army.
Thank you, sir.
Bite him in the neck.
Bite him in the neck.